This is episode number 211. There's a common problem that a lot of entrepreneurs suffer from. I certainly do. Do you? We're going to find out, and I'll give you a solution if you do. That's coming up. This is the Red Podcast, the marketing podcast for influencers. Rise above the noise. Expand your audience. Deliver impact. Here's your host, David Hooper. The topic of this episode is how to get lucky. It opened with a quote by Mike Reno. It says, "Don't ask me how, but guess who hit the big time? Don't look now, but guess who's back in town? It's so easy, don't even have to try. You're the winner. You can take the prize." This episode is about how to increase your luck as an entrepreneur. But before I get into that, let's talk about what most people think luck is. Specifically, let's talk about the lottery. Have you ever wondered what happens to lottery winners after they win the lottery? Here's some stats for you. 44% of those who've ever won large lottery prizes were broke within 5 years, according to a 2015 Camelot Group study. Nearly a third declared bankruptcy. What that means is they were worse off than before they won the lottery. Other studies show that lottery winners frequently become estranged from family and friends and incur a greater incidence of depression, drug and alcohol abuse, divorce, and suicide than average Americans. What would Mike Reno say? He'd say this is the Red Podcast, the podcast for influencers. If you're a blogger, podcaster, speaker, marketer, nonfiction author, or entrepreneur, this is the podcast for you. I talk about book publishing, podcasting, speaking, other marketing elements of your business that you must master to grow and engage your audience. That's what RED stands for: reach, expand, and develop your audience. If you haven't won the lottery, you're still working for the weekend, you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks makes sending invoices easy, and they've created a super intuitive tool that will make creating and sending invoices extremely simple. Using FreshBooks, it takes only 30 seconds to create and send an invoice. Quick and easy. The invoice has a button on it. It lets clients pay instantly, sucking the money from their credit cards, going straight into your bank account. And FreshBooks right now is offering a free month of unrestricted use to all Red Podcast listeners. It's totally free right now, and you don't even need a credit card for the trial. To claim your free month, go to freshbooks.com/red and enter RED in the How Did You Hear About Us section. I'm going to get personal for a minute. I want to share with you where I am right now with my business and where I am with my mindset that lets me have a business. And basically, it's that Red Podcast and the business around Red Podcast, working with people to build authority, to build influence, it's relatively new, just a little over 2 years old. Now, that's not to say that I haven't done this before. For over 20 years, I worked in the music industry, I've worked in the entertainment industries, I've worked in modeling, I worked in the acting industry, I've worked with authors. More or less, the same thing that I did for people in these industries is the exact same thing that I do for people like you right now. I help you grow influence, grow authority, grow credibility within your niche. So I've had a pretty good run when it comes to self-employment, about 20 years. And I've had a good run with a few flukes that I've had. One was a series of mindset books that I released. It's been almost 10 years ago at this point that I started releasing these. They took off, and I ran with it. I've had a good run with Red Podcast. It's been fantastic. Was able to jump into this, establish myself very quickly. I'm still establishing myself, still growing this thing because I always will be. But I had a pretty good run. It didn't take me that long to establish myself in the industry that I'm in now when you compare to how long that it took me to establish myself in the music industry. And a lot of that is because I've got knowledge right now. Once you do it once, you can do it a second time. You probably heard the phrase, your first million is the toughest. Once you get 1 million, you know how to do it. You can go 2, 3, 4, 5 million, $10 million, It's easier to make $10 to $20 million once you've had that first million than it is to make the first million. So 20 years in, being successful at a few different things, still having that success, yet still I feel internally like I've won the lottery. I feel that I've just got lucky. Sometimes I'll sit in my house and I think, man, how the hell am I going to keep this up for another 20 or 30 years? Because I'm not ready to retire. I'm 43 years old, man. I'm going to keep going till I die. I'm going to die with my boots on. I'm going to finish up Red Podcast. I'm going to walk out of the studio and I'm going to drop dead. Maybe I'll drop dead while I'm on the mic. That's how long that I want to keep going. I'm not going to retire. With that said, though, I have this feeling like, man, would I ever be able to retire? Will I ever be able to quit? When is enough enough? And have I just gotten lucky? Just because I've been able to do it for 20 years, does that mean I can do it for another 5, 10, 15 years? I've got this reoccurring dream, and I've had this for probably at least 15 years at this point. That's when I started tracking it, saying, man, this thing is kind of similar. It happens differently each time. The last time I had it was yesterday morning. Woke up yesterday morning, and more or less, here's how it goes. I'm in college, minding my own business, having a great time, and it's time for me to graduate. But I find out that I haven't been to class. I find out that I haven't been doing the work that I need to do. I find out that I don't have a class that I need to graduate, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And the dream is me worrying that I'm going to be able to finish this race, that I'm going to be able to graduate. And then I wake up, and a few seconds later, when I realize that I'm awake, I say, wait a minute, I've already got a college degree. None of that dream mattered. And I've got varying versions of this. A lot of time I'm in school. Sometimes I'm working on a building or a project. I bet I've had this dream 100, 200 times. And every time it's different. And I get very creative with it. These dreams could be a podcast in themselves. Very creative. But more or less, it's always a project that I'm in the middle of. I think I'm not going to finish it. And I realize once I wake up that I've already finished it. Nothing to worry about. And when I have that dream, call it subconscious communication. I always realize that whatever I'm dealing with at the time is going to be okay. Now, I've mentioned this dream to a few people, and I've certainly had the conversation with other entrepreneurs. And the questions are basically this. Do you feel that you just got lucky to get where you are right now? And do you feel that you can keep up the pace of work that you've done so far in the future? I had the conversation with a hairdresser earlier today. This is the woman who cuts my hair. She owns her own salon. She's owned her own salon for the last 15 years. Before that, she was cutting hair for 10 or 12 years. Been very successful at this. And she said, yes, all the time. I know exactly what you're talking about. Every entrepreneur that I've ever talked about is wondering, how am I going to keep up this pace? I want to take this conversation from a couple of places. One, I want to talk about what the fantasy is for people who aren't in the trenches, for the people who want to be entrepreneurs, for the people who want to be wealthy, for the people who want to be successful. And two, I want to talk about what luck and getting lucky really looks like to show you why you are where you are, and more importantly, perhaps, how you're going to be able to keep up what you've been doing for the next 10, 20, 30 years or more. So let's start with one of the big problems that I think affects all of us as entrepreneurs. It affects the entire American culture, and that's that we have a culture of waiting to be chosen. Musicians, success is being chosen for a record deal. Book authors, success is getting chosen for a book deal. Somebody picks you. They say, yes, your work has value. We pick it. Seen The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, these television shows? What is it? It's waiting to be chosen. And I think that one of the reasons that The Bachelorette or The Bachelor or any of these romantic television shows are popular, it's because we live in this culture. We want to be chosen. I'm going to be unintentionally sexist here, perhaps, but I think one of the reasons that women fantasize about weddings and their big day is because they were chosen. Now, guys, maybe you're fantasizing about that too, but if you look at our culture, the reason more women are into this fantasy than men is because men, most of the time, they're the ones who ask somebody to get married. Women, they wait to be chosen. That's our culture, and that's what I'm talking about. We have a culture of waiting to be chosen. And with marriage, it affects a lot, not everybody, but a good chunk of a gender. I don't know that this is our fault. It's our responsibility to do something about it. But if you look at our culture, again, bachelor, bachelorette, musicians getting deals, authors getting deals. Listen to this lottery commercial from Rhode Island.
This is Rhode Island Lottery headquarters. I've been asked to confirm that I'm not really sure how this happened. Mega Millions is now worth millions more in prizes.
Mega Millions is now worth even more millions. The minimum jackpot begins at $15 million. Second prize is now worth $1 million. And with a new 5 times Megaplier, could be worth $5 million.
Whose idea was this?
Mega Millions from the Rhode Island Lottery. See details at rilot.com.
What is this commercial saying? You play the lottery, you get $15 million at once, and diving into this a little bit deeper, that's basically $15 million for doing nothing. Yeah, you got to buy a ticket. What is that, $1 or $2? $15 million for doing nothing. Earl Nightingale, one of my favorite authors. If you're into success and mindset literature, you've probably heard The Strangest Secret, the first spoken word gold album ever. Lead the Field. I have these linked. They'll be at redpodcast.com/211 if you're interested in checking those out. And you really should, especially if you're a podcaster. This guy, man, could he talk. But great success information. Earl Nightingale, look him up. Strangest Secret and Lead the Field. 2 fantastic programs, completely worth the investment. He had a great quote, and he said that most people, they look to the stove and they say, give me heat. But what they haven't done is they haven't put the wood in. They haven't lit the match. They just want the heat. And to me, that's what the lottery is. We want the results without having done the action. As influencers, as far as how we affect the culture, how we add to this, I think we make it worse because we sell the dream ourselves. One of the ways we do this is we don't tell the full story. Now, that's not our fault. It's impossible to tell the full story. It is impossible for me to know what you are going through because I'm not you. And if you're listening to me, it's impossible for me to tell you everything I know about something in a 30-minute podcast, even if I'm talking about something. 30-minute podcast, I can't cover everything. The books that I write, hundreds of pages, still can't cover everything. In addition, we've got revisionism that we throw into these stories. We block out the hard work. I was at a meeting a couple months ago. See a woman I've known for about 4 or 5 years. I've seen her build her business from nothing, more or less a blog. It was a hobby. She's talking about how she became successful because right now she's making a good 6-figure income off this blog. So she's at a Q&A and people are asking her, how were you successful? What did you do? And she's acting like it was nothing. Well, I had an idea, bought a domain name, put a blog on it, started writing. Next thing you know, I'm making money. That's not how it happened because I know her. I saw her struggling. Now, I don't know if the struggle was so bad for her that she blocked it out. Maybe she didn't feel like giving away her trade secrets. But if that were the case, why would she be at a Q&A talking about this thing? I don't know. I think sometimes we block it out. Sometimes we're so far removed from who we were when we were doing that initial work that it doesn't seem like it was that tough. But it is that tough. It is that tough when you're going through it. The third element that adds to people thinking that they can get something for nothing get lucky when it comes to success is that I think people don't want the full story. The full story is not as much fun as the dream. Think about pornography. You get part of the story, but you're not seeing communication. You're not seeing having to be open. You're not seeing the boring parts of relationships. Hey, honey, could you pick this up at the grocery store? Oh my gosh, we forgot the kids at daycare. You're not seeing things like that. That's why pornography is so popular. We don't want the full story. We want the highlight reel, the sizzle reel. And people want that with success as well. Success pornography, just the highlights. So let's talk about how to really get lucky. When I have this recurring dream, I've got to sit myself down and I've got to remind myself, here's what got you here, and remind myself that there are ups and downs in any kind of business. There will be ups and downs in the future of my business, and here's how I'm going to be able to handle them. So you can use this when you're wondering, did I just get lucky? How did I get here? More importantly, because you're already here right now and you're not worried about it, how are you going to get where you want to go in the future? Seneca, a Roman philosopher, he defines luck as preparation meeting opportunity. I've heard that quote credited to several different people. Used to be a place in Nashville. It's kind of like a co-working space. I don't want to say it because I don't want to give it away. The guy running it, pretty big ego. Everybody knew it. And he would always drop quotes, but he would never credit where the quote came from. And he would say, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So I go in this place, it's a co-working space, and it's got a plaque, and it says, luck is where preparation meets opportunity, with his name under it. He also had several other quotes. Any kind of great quote, he was taking credit for it. So sometimes who we think said something, not really who said it. Regardless, though, this is true. Luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So think about that. You want to get lucky? You got to be prepared. How do you be prepared? You treat what you do as a business. To me, that means showing up daily. You show up when you're sick. You show up when you're tired. You show up when you don't want to be there. You show up in the good times, in the bad times. You show up daily. This is the best lesson that I learned from being a musician. How do you learn how to play an instrument? You show up daily. You do what we call woodshed. You put yourself in a practice room. It's you, sometimes a piano, whatever your instrument is, music stand, sheet of music, and a metronome. Metronome keeps the tempo. Click, 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 click. You start it slow, maybe a third of what it needs to be. Speed it up. 1 beat per minute at a time. Master the fundamentals. Get comfortable with playing at a slow tempo. Speed it up. Next thing you know, you're playing the music at the tempo that it's supposed to be at, and it seems too slow. That's what happens when you show up daily and you prepare the necessary foundation. As far as looking at the money that you're going to make, I look at the money that I make like a faucet, not a waterfall. And I've got a lot of these faucets. Podcast, blog, products, books, ebooks, audiobooks, different distributors, iTunes, Audible, consulting, coaching, live events, faucets, not waterfalls. Most entrepreneurs that I know, you don't make all your money in one place. And you don't want to make all your money in one place. What happens when you're making all your money in one place and that one place disappears? That's not good. You want to have all these faucets, tiny little faucets, being consistent and bringing you money every month. One of them goes away, no big deal. Imagine being a book author. All you've got is print books, and people stop buying print books. That's what happened to the music industry. You had these people who had trucks and warehouses, and they would put music on a plastic disc. We called it a CD. People stopped buying CDs. Should have gone digital. Should have been on Spotify. Should have been on iTunes. Should have been on Beatport. You want these tiny little faucets that you can turn on easily, and if one of them goes away, they're so tiny that you don't miss it because you've got dozens of other little faucets. Never, ever get connected to just one thing. When it works great. But when it doesn't work, and it's never going to work forever, nothing ever does, then you're in trouble. How do you do this? Don't be connected to the how. Remember, I started out in the music industry. All I did was work with musicians. And because of the work that I'd done with the music industry, digital work, iTunes, dealing with Napster, dealing with the digital distribution of music, then I started working in the book industry. They saw the work that I had done in the digital music space. They said, hey, it's the same job. We're just distributing books over the internet. How'd you do it in music? How were you successful when everybody was stealing music for free? That's how I got into the book business. Then it started distributing movies that way. Internet speeds got faster, compression got better. Hey, Dave, we've seen you in the music industry. We've seen you do this in the book industry. How about you show us how to do it for the movie industry? Okay. Not being attached to how is super important to that. If I said, no, I can't help you with that. I'm just a music guy. That would have been a missed opportunity for me. It would have been a missed opportunity for me not to run with it when people took my last book, which was 4 musicians, 4 people in the music industry, and they started seeing the parallels. They said, wait a minute, Dave. I think what you're telling musicians to do could also work in my industry. That's why Red exists. Because I realized that what I was doing for musicians would also work for bloggers, for authors, for speakers, for entrepreneurs, for people with a message to spread. I didn't get attached to the how. I didn't wrap up my identity thinking, no. I'm a music guy. I could never do that. Yeah, it's the same business. And you need to start thinking like that too if you want to have this longevity. It's the same business, man. Distributing a book over the internet is the same as distributing music over the internet. Distributing movies over the internet, same as music and books. You have that same thing in your industry. These tiny little faucets that are coming from many different places. When one goes away, you're still okay. When one comes up, it's not that much different from the other one. Say yes to it. Don't get attached to the how. A final thought. If you've struggled in business, if you're worried about the future, this actually means that you're in a pretty good space. The alternative, if you haven't struggled in business, if you haven't had these ups and downs, means that you got lucky. You're like one of those lottery winners. But what happened to the lottery winners? Already told you at the beginning of the episode. 44% of those who have ever won a large lottery prize were broke within 5 years, and nearly a third declared bankruptcy. They were worse off after winning the lottery than they were before winning it. That's what happens with people who win the entrepreneur lottery. They stumble into something that works. They think that it's easy. They don't know why it works. And then they think that they can do it all the time. Think I can do this again. You know, Ray Parker Jr. wrote a song. It's called You Got the Love. Shaka Khan and Rufus recorded that. Here's a clip if you haven't heard that and you're not familiar with it. Here's a clip if you haven't heard that or you're not familiar with it.
Love me right. What's the matter with you? Hold me tight. Why must I tell you what to do? Smiling comes as
So that song's written by Ray Parker Jr. You probably know him from Ghostbusters. Had a lot of hits in the 80s. Great singer, great guitarist, great writer. He wrote that song when he was 15 years old. Somehow, it got cut by one of the biggest bands of the 70s. So a record company man shows up at his door, Say, hey, man, heard you wrote this song. Would you like to go for a ride? Go for a ride in a nice Lincoln car. They made Ray Parker an offer. So I'll give you $10,000 for that song you wrote. Ray Parker's a young kid. He's thinking, hell yeah, $10,000. Never seen that much money in one place in his life. And the thought behind it, I can always write more. I'll write you all sorts of $10,000 songs. As I mentioned, Ray Parker went on to have a lot of hits. But the one I just played, You Got the Love, 40 years that thing has been making money. He is not seeing that piece of it because he sold it out for $10,000. Got another buddy of mine, Jay Praise, wrote a song called Wangsta. 50 Cent rapped over it. You've heard it.
Let's make it. You say you a gangster, but you never pop nothing. You say you a wankster, and you need to stop fronting. You ain't a friend of mine. You ain't no kin of mine. What makes you think that I won't run up on you with the 9? We do this all the time. Right now we on the grind. So hurry up and
So this thing got on a mixtape. Dr. Dre hears it. Wants 50 Cent to rap over it. 50 Cent, he was kind of known on the underground. Not a lot of people knew who he was. Not the mainstream public. So Dr. Dre calls my friend up. Say, hey, man, we'd like to buy this song from you. Now, my friend, he knew how the industry worked. He knew from stories of people like Ray Parker Jr., that wasn't the way to go. But I want you to think about that for a second. If you just got lucky, you're a young kid, you're an entrepreneur who did something and it just worked. You start thinking that it's easy. You think you can do it again. And if you're a guy working at the post office, because that's where Jay was working at the time, and you've got Dr. Dre on the other end of the line telling you that he wants to buy your song, you're thinking like Ray Parker Jr. I can write these things all the time. But my guy knew better. He'd been around for a while. He knew how tough it was to get a track listened to. He knew how tough it was to come up with the track in the first place. So he kept his rights to it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in royalties. This thing was a big hit. They made a movie about Eminem called 8 Mile. This thing goes in the movie and on the soundtrack. He makes even more money. And he's still making money off of this. That's what happens when you've had the ups and downs and you know what your work is worth. You don't get excited. You just show up every day. You do the work. You take the good. You take the bad. And you keep moving forward. And that's the summary of how to get lucky. You show up daily. You realize that the journey has ups and it has downs, just like a celebrity. Sometimes you're hot. Sometimes you're not. I got a friend of mine who says it best. He's working with an artist. He said, man, I couldn't get people to piss on him if he were on fire. Sometimes it's like that. But just like when you're up and things drop down, if you keep doing the work, when you're down, things will start looking up. Hey, speaking of getting lucky, on the next episode, I've got a conversation with a high-end escort. This is one of the benefits of having worked in the music industry. Got a connection, got hooked up with this woman. Normally, she wouldn't do this kind of thing. But on the next episode of Red Podcast, she'll be talking about her business, how she's making multiple six figures a year, selling time and companionship. If you're interested in business lessons from a high-end escort, go to redpodcast.com. That's the best way to subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Redpodcast.com. One click is all it takes. If you're on iPhone, Android, if you listen on the web, however you get your podcast, one click is all it takes. I deliver every episode to you free of charge. Thank you so much for listening to Red Podcast. If you've got questions, you've got comments, reach out to me. At David Hooper on Twitter is the best way to get me. Feedback. You need to know something. You got a suggestion for a future episode. At David Hooper on Twitter gets it all. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you on the next episode of Red Podcast.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, the marketing podcast for influencers. Never miss an episode. Subscribe now with your iPhone, Android, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.
FreshBooks makes invoicing clients easy, and they've created a super intuitive tool that makes creating and invoicing. FreshBooks makes invoicing clients easy, and they've created a super intuitive tool that makes creating and invoicing. Damn it.